This is a Clouds weather alert.
Good Thursday morning, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, coming on the air because of a severe thunderstorm warning toward the Florida Big Bend here until about 10:30 this morning. Portions of Franklin, Liberty, and Wakulla in our area, also including a little bit of Gulf outside of our area. So I know as we're looking there, we're kind of right on the boundary between Eastern and Central, but in our area it'd be Eastern, of course. 9:30 a.m. Central Time for those that are outside of our area, though, as we're looking at things. But Carabel, you're in the Eastern Time Zone, and you're at greatest risk here pretty much from this storm, and that's in our area. So we need to get you guys inside and away from windows. I know the conditions deteriorating near the coast there over the last little bit with some pretty inclement weather, obviously, there. Some folks might be kind of, trying to enjoy the beach here. It's early May. There could be quite a few people that were trying to walk on the beach earlier this morning. I'm sure most of them probably going in by now with that lightning in the area and then that rain starting to come in. But things are going to get pretty wicked here over the next few minutes. We have some pretty strong wind gusts coming on in toward that area, it would seem. So this is a pretty nasty area of convection here as we're looking. In fact, let me go ahead and go to our other radar source here as I'm kind of going through things. I know this warning is for the potential for 60-mile-an-hour winds and for quarter-size hail here. It could even, though at times the hail threat be a little bit worse than that. But you see it's headed right for Carabel. Some of the worst of this right there near the coastline as we're looking toward parts of Franklin County. But again, this includes a little bit of areas like Wakulla and Liberty as well, and Gulf there too, just outside of the area. So we're watching this very carefully here. A part of those 62 counties, we have 3 of them included right now, and you see the signature. This is actually saying hail could be a little bit over an inch in diameter here, but let's see the wind mode. You see some of this really strong wind headed toward areas of population near the coast, and now not that populated, further on up toward the north. So we've had this one in the last few minutes, not too many folks, but as we get further down, that could be a different story here. As you're driving along the roadway there that so many people do from Apalachicola to East Point to Carabel. So again, I'm just watching that carefully here this morning as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them here. You just got to be mindful of it, obviously, as we're going through all the different modes on the computer system. It just goes there to award, of course, US 98. Need to be mindful of this. We have South Central Wakulla, Southern Liberty, and Franklin counties involved in our area, with this storm only moving about 15 miles an hour, so it'll be a pretty efficient rainfall producer here. But it is included in the warning as I go ahead and broaden the view just a tad more. These include, but are not limited there to Carabel Beach, Franklin, Royal Bluff, St. George Island State Park, Beverly, East Point, Bay City, Willis Landing, Apalachicola, Twin Pole, Curtis Mill, Hayes Place, Dalkeith, Fort Gadsden, Alligator Point, Buck Siding there, as well as Morgan Place, St. Teresa, Turkey Point, and McIntyre. So everybody needs to be inside and away from windows. Just the thunder rumbling here. I know it's not a common time for a storm like this here. This is a pretty nasty one that's going to be producing multiple inches of rain. It's producing the lightning threat here. It is producing the hail threat to some degree and a damaging wind threat as well. So again, a pretty nasty storm as we're looking. The hail threat may have weakened just a little bit. But this is headed into an area that's more populated, because out here north of Krills, you'll see what I'm saying. There's not really anything in terms of the topography. There's so much population there, but it's a different story right near the coast. That's why I thought, well, let's go ahead and jump on in. Sometimes we won't jump in if it's a less populated area for a severe thunderstorm warning, but I thought, well, let's catch people off guard, because what if there's people vacationing there and, maybe leaving after being out at Apalachicola or something, or at Carabel last night. They could get caught in this. This is, a pretty common vacation time. So I thought we'd jump in here. Could this be people even, Apalachicola is pretty populated. Folks maybe trying to get there, toward the water, and this might not be something they're expecting because, as we zoom out here on the view, the rest of our area here is looking pretty good. I mean, it's looking pretty dry right now. I think it'll stay that way for a while for most of our area. Eventually, we'll see more of this fill in here with moisture, but you see like 80 around Perry is, warming on up here. Some of that storm fuel starting to come in toward the picture here, but, we're on here. We're in Bradford County watching things, but it's not impacting anywhere near Bradford. We're on for any tornado warning storm within the 62 counties. And this was doing some rotation when we were first getting ready to come on. It was starting to system spin, and the Storm Prediction Center even mentioned that a brief tornado can be rolled out for something like this here this morning. But we're also on for many severe thunderstorm warnings, many flash flood warnings, using our discretion. And if we don't think we need to come on for them, we'll just go ahead and post about them there on Facebook and Twitter. But I thought we needed to jump in with this. It's still, kind of early too in May, where, we're not in that typical summertime pattern. This is not, typical really at all to have something at 10 in the morning on the map here with a warning. It was looking even more robust a few minutes ago, the hail threat, but it's still a very nasty storm, very nasty cluster there. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things, we're watching it move off toward the south and the east. So again, let's just go ahead and jump on back on over toward the other system right now. Again, you don't really see this too often. Again, even if it's weekend, it's just a tad in terms of severe parameters here. 1 hour rainfall. I mean, you've seen around 2 inches of rain there in southern Liberty County or in the Sumatra community. And some of that could translate right there toward US 98 and toward the southern parts there of the, Florida Big Bend area, the Florida Big Bend coastline here. As we're looking at things this morning, again, a severe thunderstorm warning in play until about 10:30 a.m. So, again, watching that very carefully here, looking at some of the different modes. I know there has been some rotation with this. There still is some rotation. It depends on which radar you look at it, from here, because the Eglin radar was showing it a lot clearer there as we were looking at things this morning, as we were tracking them here in the weather centers. We're trying to give you guys the very latest information to protect you, your friends, and your family. But this is the Tallahassee radar. I'll zoom out here just a little bit as we're looking at things, and I'll switch it on over toward the Eglin Air Force Base radar site. It's not really showing rotation now, so that's good. As we're looking here, we still just continue to monitor things, obviously. As the situation does transpire, we just gotta keep paying attention. As this tries to get off the coast over the next little bit. I know Mexico discussion came out shortly before 9 o'clock, saying only a 20% chance of a watch, but there was a threat of convection, becoming severe as an increase here this morning in our weak confluence zone. As we're looking at things, a weak confluence zone, across part of the Florida Panhandle, they're saying in this discussion from just before 9 o'clock Eastern, watching there some of the activity, and in the absence of more robust large-scale ascent, the extent to which the ongoing convection can strengthen and be sustained is uncertain. However, relatively rich low-level moisture and with some instability values, MLK phase of 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram, and moderate deep layer cirro support potential for organized storms through the morning. An isolated damaging wind and hail would likely be the primary threat, so a brief tornado could not be and cannot be ruled out here in this pattern. I know this is right into the coast, and as I'll go ahead and show you here, seeing a little bit significant tornado parameters there. I know I've seen some of this in the modeling last night that I needed to watch some of this morning, and in fact, we do have again a warning in place. We're just going to composite a little bit more on the board there, and you see instability. This is what we're going to have to watch across the region. I mean, the orange area, joules per kilogram there, looking over 2,000, so that's, already pretty high. You see something trying to fire in southeastern Georgia here, 2,500 joules per kilogram, the instability. I don't know if that'll get us that together or not, but we'll have to watch that action here over the next several hours. Stuff like that, trying to get going. That might not, sometimes they'll try to get going and they'll fall off, and sometimes they'll be able to maintained herself. But let me go ahead and go to the forecast model here. And let me go ahead and just kind of run through this for those tuning in. You know, the temperatures are current, but the model is what the simulation was for this time frame. You know, it has the idea pretty down there with that storming and getting in the Gulf. Not really having any concerns. We're able to, you know, wrap the stream up here by around 10:30 or so. You don't see really anything, you know, organized enough to sustain itself into being severe. And then this gets you at 2 o'clock, still the same story. 3 o'clock, you start to see some more convection in southeast Georgia, maybe toward northeast Florida. 4 o'clock, still not a whole bunch there, but maybe, you know, we get a rug warning somewhere in here with the pulse, activity pulse, you know, storm development here. As you see toward 5 o'clock, maybe Putnam, Marion, Flagler, St. John, Duval, Nassau. You know, similar idea. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock here, 9 o'clock. As we're looking at things, 10 o'clock, you see some stuff there in southeast Georgia. It looks pretty nasty. 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. That's kind of progressing, and then we'll go into Friday. We're in alert mode because it's going to be a continuing pattern. Things are just going to get wetter and stormier by like Monday now. The models have been really hinting at maybe, you know, some even more organized severe concern around here. But you see, this is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, Southern Taylor County, 9 a.m. on that Friday, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7, 8. You see Central Florida quite a bit, 9 p.m. there, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight. You see things really building into Saturday and the holiday weekend there with Mother's Day. You know, this gets you to about the sunrise there on that Saturday. Quite a bit of convection around the Florida Big Bend. So that tells a storyline there. I know we do have a marginal risk of severe weather. It's not for tornado officially. Even a slight risk actually got issued here in the last little bit for portions of our area here as well. And as you'll see here, not for hail, but it's for damaging winds. You saw the model develop some stuff towards southeast Georgia. Well, the Storm Prediction Center says, well, it could be organized enough, you know, maybe even for some type of watch there toward Duval County and up in about Savannah. That's for later on today, a wind threat there. That's up to 15% now. As we have another one of those further north, but up that way is accompanied by a 2% tornado threat. So, and there's another one out towards southern Texas there. We have a little bit of tornado threat, hail threat, wind threat out there with the yellows. So, you know, that's something that just came out in the last hour or so. A slight risk of severe weather now more organized from Jacksonville to Savannah later on. As we look later in the day, you saw it in the modeling. You saw it in the forecast modeling there. And in fact, let me go ahead and kind of run through that again because you'll be able to see 6 o'clock or so as we're looking here, 7, 8. My stuff according to this model could be pretty late. You saw some was trying to develop already this morning, so this could be a little too late with it. We'll see, but I have to be mindful of the convection there that could develop as we look ahead in toward the timeline here as we're tracking things, as we're watching things here toward parts of the northeast Florida area and towards southeast Georgia. So again, that'll be something that I'm monitoring here in toward the Weather Center as we're looking at things here this morning and this afternoon and this evening. Again, it's probably going to be later on than earlier on, as I've already alluded to here, in toward the Weather Center, as the wind threat looks to be, you know, really intensifying there as we get toward the coastline there, you know, west side of Carabel. So let me go ahead and jump to other source. We're going to go ahead and jump to the other radar source here. You see 50-mile-an-hour winds or so possibility, you know, on this, but it could be even worse because we're not right on the radar at, you know, the point there near the coast. So something to kind of keep in mind here this morning as we're looking, as we're tracking, as we're trying to give you the latest updates. That's moving southeast, so, you know, it's going to be, you know, well, pretty much getting more into the water there. We'll be having it right there, you know, a little bit more of a land area and then back in toward the water as we're looking at things. But again, I just continuing to give you guys the very latest here this morning. I know I'm trying to pull up a different radar we normally use for this, but it doesn't quite want to work here. That's why you're seeing the other radar source when I go in a little bit hyper local. Using a quite a bit of that computer energy to use that other radar, but for whatever reason, this radar that I generally use here is stuck on like a 940 something. Okay, it finally updated, so that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that in. It's really not wanting to pull too much up, but we'll try to pull it up here to actual reflectivity mode here. So there you go, around Carabel. It's pretty nasty with the heavy downpours here at this point in time, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them here. So right there near the coast where some folks are trying to be at the beach. This is not beach weather. That's very productive right now as we're looking at things at 10:14 a.m. on this Thursday morning. Again, looking here south and west of Tallahassee. This is a lot of lightning that we're seeing here on the Doppler perspective. Again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest on this severe thunderstorm warning. It's not a tornado warning. We're always on for those. We're not always on for the severe thunderstorm warnings if they're not, nasty enough in terms of, just meeting some extra criteria. But I thought we would jump in for this one here. We'll always post them there, but this one right near the coast, odd timeline, and it was looking a little bit more robust here. But, we still have the odd timeline and it being near the coastline here where some folks may get caught off guard, at the beach. So, got to be keeping that in mind here as we're tracking here this morning, as we're keeping you guys informed. Let me go ahead and keep checking here some of the information that I can. Again, thanks so much for tuning in and trusting me on this Thursday morning. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. Again, trying to give you guys the very latest on exactly what is going on exactly what is happening here. As the situation does transpire. Again, let's check some other things here. Let me go ahead and put on the infrared satellite imagery. We'll do that. And then we'll go over to visible as well. But infrared really says that one cluster there. Aloft it says it even higher up. But you see visible, a lot of clouds there. But in the breaks, and not even that much cloud cover. Further off toward the east here. That's going to allow more instability and things to develop here as we look ahead through the day here. Again, the target zone here, unfortunately, for some of these severe storms, looks to be there in the ward areas from Jacksonville and southeast Georgia later on in our area. That's going to be still several hours away. So that's the good news. It doesn't seem like, we had a little bit something trying to develop in radar. The models are really holding this off until, closer to the evening. It may not wait and be pushed off that far, but we're just going to have to continue to watch and wait here. The areas have risk too, as you see toward the west now, but this is the area of greatest concern from Jacksonville to Nassau County. You see areas there, Folkestone in Georgia there, St. Mary's, Nahana, Waycross, Brunswick here, as we're looking at things and up towards Savannah out of our area. That's a risk of wind damage that's, going to be a little bit more prominent here in terms of just, technically enough, maybe, just over the years to get a thunderstorm watch. I don't know if we'll quite have enough convection for that. It'll kind of be probably, a calming right there, as things are getting going up. It's organized enough because we may not have enough, of the overall threat there to have enough warning to really require a watch, but that's still a focal point for severe weather as we look ahead later on in the day. But, once this gets in the Gulf here, we should be clear of any warnings for probably at least a few hours, if not longer than that. So that'll be some good news. But we're just going to keep on looking at things here across our area. It looks like we did get an update here. Okay, so they just sent out an update. The Weather Service in Tallahassee at 10:16 a.m. Eastern, 9:16 a.m. Central. a severe thunderstorm, the focal point of it, which was located 7 miles west of Carabel, moving southeast at 15 miles an hour. Carabel Beach, Franklin, Alligator Point, St. Teresa, Turkey Point, Royal Bluff, McIntyre, High Bluff, Yent Place, St. George Island State Park, St. George Island, Beverly, Greenpoint, Carabel, East Point, Bay City, Lanark Village there, as well as Apalachicola, Krills, and Hay Place. So as we're looking there, we're just going to continue to give you guys the very latest. A lot of lightning, a lot of heavy downpour, some of it, hail threat there, and also some of a wind threat. So again, just continuing to track here. Definitely the hail threat has gone down, but we are further away on the radar, so that's something to take into consideration here as well as we're looking at things, as we're tracking. I know we have so many different parameters in play. We have a boundary, and that's going to be serving as a focal point here in its overall pattern, as we're tracking things, as we're looking ahead. And we're just going to try to stay tuned here, as we're watching here and as we're tracking. And watching on YouTube, Marcus, this is definitely, a big cluster there along the coast. As we're tracking things in terms of the meteorology this morning, as we're continuing to watch there, everything that does transpire. I'm going to go ahead and pull up some longer range model guidance because we study the next 2 days. But let's try to get past tomorrow and into Saturday, Mother's Day weekend period. This will be early on that Saturday. See the moisture around, and then we'll continue to watch the progression. We really, really need the rain. We're gonna have a severe threat on and off. And that's why we have the logo red. Maybe even, on Monday that one could, even stand out a little bit more, maybe. Based on some of the longer range models, but even before that, it could be an isolated tornado threat under this storm had, some rotation with it. It doesn't look like we're going to get a tornado warning, though, before it gets off the coast ahead, weakened some, so that's good. But this is like 2 p.m. on that Saturday with the forecast model, 5 p.m., 8 p.m., 11, 2 in the morning Sunday, 5 in the morning on that Sunday. You see, get in the afternoon on Mother's Day. It says 2 o'clock. Unfortunately, weather not looking great. Even maybe, some stronger storms in here when the high res goes with that aggressive here. And let me take off the current temps. I just have them up for reference here for what we have right now. But this is, as we get toward the afternoon on that Saturday, even on that Saturday, people headed back from mom's house and the like, it could be pretty nasty. Be very, very careful on the roads, as you see. Breaks up some, but you still have the moisture lingering on into the night time. This is Monday morning commute time. Maybe some more convection. You see some organization toward the I-75 corridor in the afternoon on Monday toward I-95, and you see some of that lingering around here. As we get, this will be now the 13th, so that'll be into Tuesday. And then finally starting to get some of this to push away as we get more toward Tuesday here. Based on some of the latest models, this is now Wednesday. You see less moisture around there. So it's going to be an extended period here. Now on Thursday with this model run, you don't see much popping up as I get, further in this into Friday. As we get further out, it becomes, forecasted. It has less confidence, but, this gets into Saturday, Sunday, and the likes. Again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest here this morning. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring them here. Just trying to keep you up to date on what's going on. As the situation just transpired, there's a little bit of random lightning there near the Taylor County coast here this morning. So, remember thunder roars go indoors, but this storm here mainly is headed more into the Oregon Gulf than it is toward Taylor County, it looks like to me. So we'll keep watching and keep tracking the models, and just my eye here kind of said, my eyes say, this is headed more into toward the Gulf than it is toward more land areas. So that's some good news as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. in toward the weather center. So, watching things down here toward the Gulf Coast. We're just gonna continue to give you guys the very latest here as the situation does progress. You see, it gets to about 20-something miles an hour toward Apalachicola. So we're watching, that, but obviously the stronger one will be further off toward the east here along US 98. So again, just trying to keep you guys up to date here this morning by trying to keep you guys up to date on the latest weather developments. Again, this warning includes portions of Franklin, Liberty, and McCulloch counties for another few minutes. We'll probably wrap it up soon here, assuming they're not going to extend this warning. But again, just trying to give you the very latest here on this. It's still kind of lingering around the coast. It's a little weaker than what it was, quite honestly, here as we were looking. Earlier on, there was some more wind concern. A lot of this is starting to get off more in toward the coastal waters now. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking them here this morning, we'll see in this other mode. A lot of that more in toward the water, or, kind of, I know you have St. George Island down, toward the coast, and the like, but a lot of that looks weaker here nonetheless as we continue to give you guys the very latest here on what's going on this morning. Again, just trying to keep you guys up to date here. But as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring them here, just be inside, be away from those windows here. It's not quite as strong as it was, but there's still a lot of rain. You can kind of pretty quick, rising here in terms of, the water, in terms of, those puddles really starting to form, and then on the road, it all of a sudden becomes in a spot or two, maybe a little, too deep to want to drive through even, as we're looking at things. So again, it's a bit thunderstorm warning continuing in a few minutes. We'll be wrapping it up soon here in toward the weather center. So again, we're watching that near the coast, but otherwise the rest of the area looks pretty good for several hours. But later on, it's going to be a different story as we look toward Jacksonville and Baker County here, and then up into toward Georgia, southeast Georgia. We have that damaging wind risk that could concentrate a little bit more, but other areas will still have a lowering chance as well. So just got to kind of stay tuned for the very latest here as you're watching on all the different platforms here, as we're looking at things here, whether it's on Facebook or on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch there. Cloudweather.com has all the different links available, as we're looking at this, as we're tracking this. I know we don't have any real good shots, of the traffic cameras down there. Unfortunately, I'd be trying to pull that up here into our system, but I noticed there was one around Cape Sandblast, but it's a little bit further off to the east, I know, up there. I may try to pull that one in, but that's, getting a little bit further off toward the west. Depending on which way it's pointed, I might not be able to see very much. Well, we'll show it to you. It's a little bit further off toward the west, obviously, but it gives you an idea, of what the communities down here, at least in the vicinity look like. As we go ahead and we'll pull this in here off the traffic source. Bear with me. This one's a little bit further off toward the west though, but this just gives you an idea here. So I have to be weather aware, obviously, even in a coastal area when you're driving along, like US 98 and the like. So again, just be very mindful here. This is in the central time zone, this camera, but nonetheless, just kind of giving you an idea here of what things, look like down there. That's the one camera available, but it's a little bit further off toward the west, even Indian Pass there. That's not even on US 98, that's, further south, but, the way the coast is there, US 98 doesn't go to that area, but again, just trying to give you guys an idea here of what we're dealing with this morning. Watching the different developments, obviously, around St. George Island, and points eastward here. So again, I just continuing to give you guys the very latest here on what's going on with the Doppler technology. We're right there approaching 10:30 in the morning on this Thursday, this May 8th, 2025. A meteorologist, Casey Cloud, here in the Weather Center as we watch this storm accent here get off, toward the coastal waters. Still, affecting decent amount of land areas though, but not quite as strong as it was when it first started, but still definitely nasty, definitely still dangerous. If you're caught outside, this is not the type of weather that you want to be dealing with here this morning, that is for sure. As we're looking down there, we're just going to go ahead and keep watching. I know, again, it's a big threat for later on today, increasing from Jacksonville and Baker County northward into southeastern Georgia. So, Storm Prediction Center and that's what's with Jacksonville. Really watching that. It may not take to the evening for that to really get going, but it's still going to be a while, it would seem. It still be a while, but again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here. Just trying to keep you guys informed. As we track everything here meteorologically. Okay, the warnings just going away in our systems here. On one of them, it just went off and was approaching 10:30. I think they probably sent out a statement saying they're dropping it. Going ahead and allowing this to expire, I would think. Yeah, they're gonna, allow it to expire as a storm, which prompted the warnings really moved out of the area, the worst of it. So that's the good news as we're watching things here this morning. So, still some strong, storminess there in that vicinity, but the worst of the threat there, it's not really notable, and it's also some of that's been moving off more toward the coastal waters. So that's going to do it for now. We'll be back here as warranted later today. I know you have clutter.com/radar for an interactive look at things. When we're not on air, you can use that. But otherwise, we'll pop back in here as warranted. Some severe thunderstorm warnings may not warn me to come on, but some of them will. So please stay tuned, stay safe. As we're looking at things, and these type of storms can cause, some isolated to scattered power outages. That's something to keep an eye out for as well. Make sure you have those devices charged up a little bit here. This isn't a big organized threat, but still, just be ready for some power outages for a short period of time here with some of these storms coming on in. And whenever thunder roars, go indoors, but just stay tuned. We'll be back as warranted for warnings. If it's just an advisory or something, it's not where we have to be on, but when there's a warning, and if it's a tornado warning, will be on for sure, but many severe thunderstorm warnings popping in, flash flood warnings, if those become an issue here, we do need the rain, but don't want too much rain too quick, but if, those become an issue, will be on as well, but we'll be posting those on Facebook and Twitter, if nothing else here, if they're not enough of an issue. But stay tuned to Cloud Weather, we'll keep you guys up to date.